The Atlanta Falcons are a poverty franchise, and honestly, one of the bigger laughing stocks in the NFL currently. They just fell to 3-4 after losing at home to the 1-6 Miami Dolphins 34-10. This game was never close. The Dolphins really dominated it from start to finish. And I get the Falcons had some injuries in this game. They're missing a couple starters on defense. Michael Penix was out, Drake London was out. But this game is just a microcosm of the entire season for the Falcons so far, really just how I view their organization as a whole. Because do you remember a couple years ago when the Falcons shelled out a huge contract to Kirk Cousins, making him their starting quarterback? When I and tons of other people in the media called out the Falcons for this move, basically saying it made no sense, especially if you're going to take a quarterback inside the top 10 of the draft. And what do you know, like 6 months later after making that signing, Cousins was benched, they insert Michael Penix, and the rest is pretty much history at this point. But what I'm getting at here is Kirk Cousins went into this season as the highest paid backup in NFL history, and the Falcons kept him on the roster for two reasons. One, because not really anybody wanted to trade for him because he's an older player off a major injury making a ton of money, but two, just in case Michael Penix suffered an injury and missed some time. So Cousins again got the start last Sunday, and he looked absolutely atrocious. He was sailing balls high. He could not be very accurate down the field. It just seems like he's washed and just not even close to the same player we saw a couple years ago for the Minnesota Vikings. But that is a reflection on this Falcons organization. Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot, they paid this player a ton of money and have kept him on the roster this entire season so far. And it just brings that situation to light again of signing him in the first place. It was an awful decision then, and it's even a worse decision now because he's stuck on their team. He's simply not tradable at this point. Nobody's going to trade for him at the trade deadline, and he's pretty much just wasted salary cap on the Falcons organization. But something else that's been very obvious with this team throughout this entire season is just how predictable their offense is. It's honestly a joke that the Falcons offense has been this up and down this season because they have so many talented players on that side of the ball. I don't think Zach Robinson is that good at his job, but I don't think all the blame should necessarily go on him. Michael Penix, when he's been in, has been pretty hit or miss, and overall their offense has just been so predictable, and a big reason for that is they just want to live in the pistol formation, which honestly makes it pretty hard to sustain your run game. It actually gives defenses more time to react to what the play is because the running back takes a longer time to get to the line of scrimmage, view the holes, and decide where he wants to go. It has been reported that Bijan Robinson does like playing in pistol because he can read the defense a little bit better, but I think as an offense, you can't simply just run out of that formation time and time again. It becomes so predictable. There has to be some way where you can mix and match what you run out of that formation and utilizing the run game in different other areas and formations on your offense. So I don't understand in the first place the Falcons' thought process on that side of the ball. It seems like they have no consistent plan or how they really want to utilize their type of playmakers. And this past Sunday against the Miami Dolphins, who were the worst run defense in the league by a pretty wide margin heading into the game, they shut down Bijan on 9 carries for 25 yards, and he only got 12 touches in the entire game. I don't know if that's all on Zach Robinson or if it's all on Raheem Morris, but that in itself is just a fireable offense. Bijan has emerged as one of the best playmakers in the entire league. I mean, he's just an elite player. You get the ball in his hands, he's going to make 3 or 4 people miss and just pick up a huge chunk play more often than not. And when you're starting your backup quarterback, to only give him 12 touches against that type of defense, it's just laughable. I know he was not generating a ton of yards per carry, like I mentioned, 9 for 25 yards, but a big reason for that again is going back to their formation. Every time the Dolphins saw him sitting in pistol, they would send some run blitzes, and there was Bijan stopped in the backfield for no gain. You have to be creative as an offensive coordinator and find different ways to get him the football, because we've seen teams across the league like the Colts and Jonathan Taylor, the Eagles and Saquon Barkley manufacture touches for one of the best players in their entire team, and they routinely dominate defenses week in and week out. I think Bijan is equally or more talented than those backs I just named, and for him to not get those same sort of opportunities or even more in this Falcons offense when their backup quarterback is in the game, it just makes no sense and shows you how poorly coached and run this team really is. But this past Sunday's result really wasn't that surprising to me because this Falcons team has been like this for 2 years ever since Robinson and this new coaching staff showed up. I remember last year when Kirk Cousins was starting, they had a primetime game against the Philadelphia Eagles and then miraculously won that one with Cousins leading a game-winning drive. You go to this season just a couple of weeks ago against the Buffalo Bills and they destroyed Josh Allen and that Bills team who were pretty heavy favorites on the road, and that was because their defense was playing with their hair on fire. They got so much pressure pressure on Josh Allen and really shut down their passing attack. And that's also when we saw Bijan explode for like over 200 yards. He had one of his best games of his career. But I think now we've kind of learned that that game was more about the Bills' flaws and the Falcons just having a bye week and more time to prepare a game plan to stop the Bills than it does about the Falcons being some great team. My big take about that Bills-Falcons game is Jeff Ulbrich, their defensive coordinator, he's routinely put together a really good plan when going against Josh Allen. People forget he was the defensive coordinator for the New York Jets for a couple of years, and Allen always has struggled against that Jets defense, and I think Ulbrich always puts together a pretty good game plan to stop him. So when you give him over a week to craft that game plan and you're at home, I can understand that result a little bit better now, but as we've seen, that is the outlier, not this past Sunday's game against the Dolphins, because again, go back to earlier this season, and the Carolina Panthers shut out the Falcons 30-0. Again, we saw Bijan only have 13 carries despite averaging over 5.5 yards per. Michael Penix was turning the ball over left and right. The Panthers offense was very efficient. The Falcons could not force a turnover, and they got dominated in that game by a Panthers team that, again, does not have the same type of talent that this Falcons team does. So I think when you take the 2-year tenure of Raheem Morris as the Falcons coach these last 2 seasons, the big takeaways is the inconsistency from a week-to-week basis. And with all the money they've spent in recent years, all of the top draft picks and resources, that is a coaching issue. It is not the overall talent on this roster. Because I think there's a lot of contending teams out there in the NFL right now that would happily take a ton of players on this Falcons roster because they do have some pretty good talent top to bottom. It is just not being developed or utilized properly, and that is again on the shoulders squarely of Raheem Morris and his coaching staff. The only real positive you can take away is this Falcons team is still 3-4. They're in the mix for a wild card spot in the NFC. I think beating out the Bucs for the NFC South crown is practically a pipe dream at this point, but there are still some fairly easy games on their schedule. They play the Panthers again, they have the Saints twice, they play the Jets and the Cardinals. Theoretically, those should be winnable games, but as we've seen with this Falcons team, we have no idea what team is going to show up on a week-to-week basis. But it's really going to come down to how this team responds, because now they've had 2 straight losses in pretty embarrassing fashion. Is the team going to quit on Raheem Morris and their entire coaching staff? Are they going to finally figure some things out and get the train back on the tracks? Can they go on a slight run and win 9 to 10 games, sneak into the wild card round and make the playoffs? If that doesn't happen, I do think really every single member of this Falcons organization and coaching staff is going to be fired, because they sold their owner Arthur Blank on this idea that the team was very close to contending. That is why they spent so much money on Kirk Cousins. That is why they spent so much money in free agency. And if you go 2 straight years with a losing record and not making the postseason after selling the guy who hired you on that fact, I think there's going to be some head rolls and everybody's going to be in some trouble. So the last really 2 months of this season are absolutely massive for Raheem Morris and his future as an NFL head coach. I don't want to come off like Morris is a bad coach. I do think he's proven himself to be a really good defensive mind, but I think that might be where he's best suited as an NFL coach. Some guys are just not meant to be the lead man in charge, making all the decisions and leading the team. Maybe Morris is just meant to be a defensive coordinator, and he'll just be that for the rest of his career, still making a couple $1 million a year, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if he is not able to turn around this season, I do think he's going to be relegated to that defensive coordinator position again, and the Falcons franchise would just be in a very bad spot, because if you remember, they traded their first-round pick in this next year's draft to move up and draft James Pierce at the end of the first round. I was not a big fan of that move because, again, I did not see the Falcons as some great team this year. They're going to be picking probably in the teens, and to trade that asset for a pass rusher that does have his limitations of not being the biggest guy, some off the field concerns, I just didn't think that was a smart decision by the organization. They really went all in on this season, and again, it looks like it's blowing up in their face as we sit here towards the end of October. So it's going to be a very interesting next couple of months in Atlanta. I want to know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think the Falcons should move off of Raheem Morris in this current regime, or do you have faith that they can turn it around? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like in the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.